Hey, welcome everybody. Here we are. We are back live, Conscious Collective Lives. I was just telling David before that it's been almost a month and a half, 2 months since we've done a live. So I'm very excited to do this. And what a tremendous guest we've got tonight. David, you are an educational consultant, 25 years of teaching experience. This is what I love. You have been an early childhood teacher with 4 to 5-year-olds. And that is just brilliant for 25 years. Then this is, I imagine, where everything in you have formulated, your theories of being and learning of how children work. So I'm so excited to dive into that. You're also the convener of the Tasmanian Reggio Alliance. Tell us a little bit about, first of all, we'll start with the Reggio Alliance and how you bumped into the world of Reggio, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, great. Thanks, and thanks for inviting me, Rick. And we have a thing here in Australia where we always like to acknowledge the country on which we're coming to you from. So I'm actually coming to you from a place called Nipaluna, but people would probably more commonly know it as Hobart, Tasmania. And I live at the foot of Kununyi, Mount Wellington. And so I want to acknowledge the Mwinana people as the traditional custodians of the land on which I live and learn. So, yeah, my first encounter with Reggio. So, you know, when I first encountered Reggio, I guess I was one of these people that really hadn't heard a lot about it. I probably, if you'd said to me Reggio Emilia, I would have done the thing that you hear so many people do, which is, who is this Reg guy, and is Emilia his wife? And I really didn't know much about it. And I was working in Canberra at the time, in our nation's capital, and I got a new job at a preschool. And I walked into this centre for the first time when I was first given a tour. And there was a feeling, there was something about this centre that spoke to me differently than places I'd been in before. There was children's work visible. There was documentation. There was this real sense of community, of making learning visible, of democracy, of partnerships and relationships. Things that seemed to me to be a bit of a utopia. And I started to find out a little bit more about what practice and what theories and what ideas were inspiring this centre and the way that they worked. And so I began being introduced to the ideas of Reggio Emilia. And so that was close to 17 years ago, I guess, 17, 18 years ago now. And yeah, my journey with and my relationship with Reggio has been a constant one ever since. And so I've been fortunate enough to go to Italy, I have to say, on 7 occasions to Reggio Emilia. So my wife actually jokes with me that I need to go and get my Reggio fix, because otherwise I'm not a very happy person.
So, yeah, you played that. I can see. Yeah, that's good.
yeah. So I've been very lucky that that's been supported in my life. But I go there not because I want to be Reggio, because I want to be just like Reggio, because we can't. We're Australia, you're New Zealand. We're a different context, but we can be inspired and provoked and challenged, and really, it's a really great opportunity to reflect and to look at ourselves and our practice and our image of children and what we mean by education differently. And I think it's a very hopeful pedagogy. And so I got exposed to those ideas and started involving myself in local network groups to find out as much as I could. I'd start doing lots of reading. I started to go to seminars and conferences and things. And from that, I then got involved with the Tasmanian Network when my wife and I moved to Tasmania, and just started getting involved with that a lot more and became the convener of the group. And through that, we've managed to do some professional learning here for teachers and educators. We're part of the national organisation, which is the Reggio Emilia Australia Information Exchange, or REAIE, as it's better known. And so it's a national body, but there's lots of networks around the country. And so each of those networks have conveners. But like Reggio, it's not about a person at the front, it's about the collective. And so even though I was the convener, it was very much a group mentality.
You mentioned some really cool phrases. So you talk about being a hopeful, pedagogy, seeing the sense of community, making learning visible, democracy, terms that I'm recognizing from the language that bubbles up when you delve deeper into the Reggio approach. A little different to just like Pinterest, nice natural environments, which often is mistaken for the Reggio approach.
Yeah.
What do you see? I mean, what do you think about that?
Look, it is, people tend to go, and I have to say, because my wife's been exposed to this for a long time, she knows a lot of the phrasing as well that I use, but because she knows that sort of thing really kind of gets under my skin a little bit, where it's like, oh, this is very Reggio. She'll say things like that, oh, here's a glass jar with a few shells in it. That's very Reggio. And she does that to stir me because she knows I'll bite. Because those sorts of they're poor iterations of what Reggio is. Reggio is a place first and foremost. It's a city, and it's got a history and a culture. But there's an attitude. There are principles that underlie this project that have been talked about and lived through their experience for many years, since the end of the Second World War. And there's aspects of it that I just love so much, and that I continue to use to inspire my thinking. The pedagogy of listening is a big part of it. This idea of how can we position ourselves as listeners rather than tellers. The idea of 100 languages, that children have these many different ways of expressing their thinking and their understanding and their theories, that there's not just one way, that they make connections in many ways. This idea of participation and democracy and rights that's central to their approach. The idea of that learning is a process of co-construction, that it's not something that's done to, it's done with, and that everybody, the city, the children, the teachers, the families, they're all part of this collective. So there are lots of aspects to it that speak really loudly to me, and I do get a kind of a little bit. Of course, the environment's a big part of it. The environment as the third teacher is a phrase that's come out of Reggio that a lot of people know about, that the environment gives us messages about what we value, about how to interact with the space, etc. Of course, that's a big part of the ideas in Reggio, but it's only one aspect, and it's an aspect that people hook into without necessarily understanding a lot of the other layers that are there that make it such a rich and, as I say, hopeful pedagogy.
Let's take the hook of the environment of the third teacher. Maybe some of our audience, they're like, oh yeah, okay, okay, I don't really know too much. I look at David's bookshelf and I'm like, looks like it's color sorted, so that looks very Reggio, and that's kind of what I thought it was: sorting of materials, beautiful environments, and maybe they've even stumbled upon provocations. If you delve just a layer deeper and you kind of look at the why behind environment as the third teacher, what does it mean? Where has it stemmed from, and why is it a thing?
Look, the environment is it's one of those things where it's not. You have to look at everything in Reggio as being very interconnected. I mean, I talked about these principles and I just rattled off environment as third teacher and 100 languages and democracy and all these sorts of things. But everything is so interconnected. So the environment is seen very much as part of that interconnected way of thinking about the way that they work and they exist. And so when they talk about the environment, they see it as a support for their ongoing research. Because everything that they do is with an attitude of research. It's wanting to know more about how the children are working and why they're making this choice over that choice, and why are they interested in that material and not this material. And so the environments are there to support interactions. They're there to support research. They're thought about as places for encountering each other, for encountering otherness, for encountering different ideas, and they're constantly thought about and reflected upon. So nothing is done without any intentionality or without any thought or without educators coming together and saying, well, why are we putting this here and not that there? What's the relationship when we bring something like clay in relationship to light? How's that going to make children see these things differently? They've constantly got this attitude of research when they're thinking about the environments and the spaces. And they also approach this with an attitude of aesthetics and beauty as well, because they believe that aesthetics and beauty are a way that we make connections with ideas. It's not just about things looking pretty. Of course, that's beauty is really important, but it's got that other layer to it as well. It's about how do we make connections? How do we understand things more richly? And so I think the other thing that I talked about before was this idea of the environment giving us messages. And I think we can underestimate what power the environment has to give us a message without any person saying a word. I mean, we know that when we go into a cafe or somebody's home, that it's speaking to us in all sorts of ways about what they value, about how you move and interact in the space, all sorts of things. I often say there's a very different message that we get from a group of children will get a very different message from a lump of clay in the middle of a table as opposed to a lump of clay that's individually put on a placemat at a chair, as to how they interact with it without you even saying a word. And neither one's right or wrong. I'm not saying put a lump of clay in the middle or put a lump of clay on individual placemats. But we have to understand that the environment and the materials that we set up give different messages to how do we interact and how we make sense of the world and how we make connections. So, a lump of clay in the middle might encourage more interaction, might encourage more collaboration, whereas an individual lump of clay might say, hey, I want you to work separately. So we've got to be constantly reflecting on why this choice, not that choice. How is the environment giving us messages?
I love that. The environment giving us messages. It brings me back to this, to the notion of presencing yourself with the children in the environment. And I think it's Carlina Rinaldi who talks about listening with your whole body, all your senses, and not just your ears, not just for the words, but for the feelings, the energy, the emotional intelligence that comes in the engagement with the environment. And magic seems to emerge. I love what you're saying, the environment sending us messages. Magic seems to emerge from almost, I call it the emergent future. The thing that wants to come to pass calls us forward without us needing to push it. And we sometimes, as an educators, we can try and plan and push it in a direction, or our intention can drive it into a certain space instead of being able to be present, holding space, and just seeing what bubbles up, what emerges, what messages comes forward.
Yeah, look, you bring me straight to another quote from Carla Rinaldi, and it's one of my favorites and was probably my mantra as I was a teacher. If I was to choose a few, that was probably one of them. And she said at one point that the potential of a child is stunted if the end point of their learning is formulated in advance. And I just think, how often do we as adults, sometimes unintentionally, penalize children's thinking and the possibilities and the pathways that might open up if we've already pre-formulated where this is going to go, if we've already decided this is the end point, this is the product, this is the destination, this is the outcome? Have we actually stolen from children the possibility of many pathways, many possibilities? And so that's about slowing down and actually stopping ourselves and stepping back and actually looking at what our role is as an educator. Are we there to be a transmitter, or are we there to actually be a co-constructor and be alongside rather than up here, alongside the child as a co-researcher? And that speaks to me very much of designing learning rather than planning learning as well.
Yeah, let's stay here. I love this space because first of all, there's probably in my general outing in our educator kind of space, there's not many of us who have really grasped what it means, including myself, what it means to be a teacher as a researcher. And it feels quite academic sometimes if you can't delve into like, how do I show up day to day in my classroom as a researcher? What does that mean? So have you talk me through this role as a teacher, as a researcher in this space?
Look, okay, it's a big one, but I also I love words. I love this unpacking words, and I think this idea of research is something that that we need to claim as something that isn't just academic. Of course, there's academic levels to it, but we need to we need to reclaim it. Children are researchers. We know children are researchers. As soon as they're born, they're researching things, and they're wanting to discover and find out, and they have this innate sense of curiosity. I mean, Neil deGrasse Tyson, who's the astrophysicist and science communicator, says, that children are innately curious, and we don't need to teach them how to be curious. It's just important we don't squash what's already there. And I'm kind of paraphrasing, but that's the gist of it. But we see children wanting to be researchers, to be inquisitive, to explore things with this sense of wonder. But we also, I think, as educators, we need to let go of the fact, as I said before, that we are in control of this. We need to put ourselves alongside, and to do that, to put ourselves alongside children, we need to have questions in our mind. Because if I go back to, once again, our colleagues in Reggio Emilia, I can remember Tiziana Filippini, who's a well-respected pedagogista, has been for a long time there, says, you've got to have questions in your mind, otherwise you risk seeing everything or nothing. And so having questions actually just helps you to I don't know if you've ever been in a centre where you feel like you've been told, or you know the importance of documentation, and you just try and document, but you can just feel like you're sometimes drowning in documentation. You've got, oh my God, I've got so many sticky notes, and I've got written conversations, and I've got photographs and what have you. It just feels like you've just got all of these things, and you've got all these wonderful ideas from the children. You go, I don't know which one to follow, and where do I go? It all seems a bit confusing. Unless you've got this attitude of research and questions and what is it that you're wanting to know, then you just get lost. You drown in these disconnected sticky notes. I consider it a bit like a patchwork quilt. You've got all of these squares of a quilt, but there's actually nothing that's really joining them together. And so having some research questions really helps you to get closer and be more in tune and more sensitive to the way that the children are working in order to design the ways forward. If you're not listening and noticing and researching, how can you actually design authentic, meaningful experiences for them? Because otherwise it becomes very much something that the teacher has decided and the adult has decided. I can think of a particular project, if you don't mind me sharing, one where we had questions as a group of teachers, as educators, with 4 and 5-year-olds that we were working alongside. And one of our questions was, how could we make our children more visible in our local community? And because we believe very strongly in children being capable and competent, and we wanted to find opportunities to highlight this and to make children more visible, and for the community to be able to see what incredible ideas and theories they had. And so that was our initial research question. So we decided we would take our children to the local shopping centre, which was within walking distance of the centre. And the shopping centre was not an enclosed shopping centre. It was like a horseshoe shape. And so there were various shops around this horseshoe with car park, and you could drive in and park your car in front of the hairdresser or the doctor's surgery or the supermarket or the bakery or the post office. And this is where I come back to this idea of the potential of the child is stunted if we've already predetermined the endpoint. Because as teachers, of course, we had hypotheses about what they might be interested in. We thought, oh, maybe they might be interested in the post office, and maybe we might be able to do some things around communication and boring. Because what actually ended up happening was when we went to the shop and we documented and we listened and we spent time gathering photos and we gave children devices to take photos and we gathered all of our data, because that's another word I want to reclaim in a good way. When we gathered all of our data and we looked through it and we looked at it through the lens of what's this showing us, what potential is here, what are the children interested in, what theories do they have. There was a common thing that started coming up, and it was something that we didn't expect at all. The children weren't interested in the post office or the doctor's surgery, or they were interested in a shop that was completely empty, that had nothing in it. It was, it was a shop for lease, it was completely blank. And we started seeing it coming up in their drawings. We started hearing it in their conversations. And the main reason they were interested in this shop that was empty was because they felt sorry for it, because all the other shops had things in and had friends, and this empty shop had no friends. And so they were empathizing with a shop. And so what started to happen from this is that we started to develop an inquiry, a project around how could we make this shop feel better, and what do we need to cheer up this shop, which came from their questions and their wonderings. So our research question started to develop a little bit more into how are the children developing a sense of empathy in their relationship with this empty shop. And so we had this question about making children visible and developing a sense of empathy. And then what happened is the children came up with all of these great ideas for cheering up. I'm summarizing a massive project really quickly. They came up with all these wonderful ideas to cheer up the shop, including singing songs to it and writing letters. And we had problems because we wanted to go into the shop and present them with gifts. And they said, no, you can't because of OH&S. But of course, children, as soon as you take a problem back to them, they know they've got solutions for it. They work out creative ideas. Look, it's okay, David. We can set up, just across there. There's some grass, and the shop can see from there, and we can sing. And so they came up with all of these different ideas and solutions. But having this lens of how are they looking at, how are they developing their sense of empathy, having this research question actually gave us focus to what were we trying to make visible? What was important? What was this all about? This wasn't just about cheering up a shop. It was something far richer and something far more worth knowing than something that could have been if we just said, oh, let's learn about the post office and where letters go. This became about empathy, and it became about making our children visible in our local community, because of course, as soon as we started cheering up the shop and doing things and we performed in front of the shop, we had people coming up. Why are you here? What are you doing? Tell us about this. And so we managed to address our research questions, and it was a far richer project than one that we would have had if we just said, yeah, let's go and learn about the post office.
And so as an educator as well, what I love in this process is that you become the learner. Like, this is like, how interesting that the children have just added our provocation for us. They have been more attracted to the empty shop. And now you've got a treasure trove of unknowns that you can start curious about and wonder about. Like, how does empathy develop with children? And is it innate, or is it a group think? Is it cultural? Is it, and it reminds me of this neuro lab that did an experiment on empathy. And what they noticed was that even if a scenario was painted with a triangle, 3 triangles, and there's different colors, and 2 triangles would come together and with warmth, kind of like swim in harmony, we would have a positive emotion towards it. But if there was like a bully triangle that came in and like hit with sharp points the other triangle, we would have the same empathetic response as if something bad is happening to a human. So we use this symbolism to interpret empathy all the time. We feel it, whether it's a triangle or a human or a shop. That's just this layer of understanding of humanity that as a teacher, you have just uncovered an incredible kind of like psychological truth.
And I think we need to come back to these questions around, we need to ask ourselves, what's actually worth knowing? What is worth knowing, and what's going to spark joy and enthusiasm and engagement? And, if we apply those 2 questions, like what's worth knowing and what sparks joy, to this particular project, it speaks wonders to me of the we need to unpack what is education for. What is it all about? You know, it's not about transmission of content. Children can learn how letters are delivered in a post office. You can Google anything these days on your phone. You know, it's not about the what's and the content. Of course, you need that as a vehicle for exploring these much bigger things. You need something to hold on to. The empty shop ended up being the vehicle for exploring these things, but it's more about those things like empathy, like collaboration, like you know, citizenship, democracy, relationships, joy, listening. Those are the things that are worth knowing. These are the things that are going to help our children to be, you know, beautiful people and citizens in this world, and as they currently are. So yeah, I think we need to have some big discussions about what is education for, and put a bit more focus on the how and the why, not just the what.
I love this idea that you can just learn as a teacher. We're surrounded by geniuses, by children who are so much more divergent than what we are. They're able to put and place meal, you know, ideas together that's wildly creative and outside of the way that we've been taught to think. And if we slow down enough and we listen, that really we become so engaged in the learning process ourselves. Yeah. And so from that kind of the image of the child, it seems that goes hand in hand with this idea of the teacher as a wanderer or a researcher.
Absolutely. And I think we spend a lot of time talking about image of child. We'd say, you know, we want to see children as competent and capable, as citizens, as creative, as curious, all those words. But I don't think we necessarily spend as much time thinking about, well, what is our image of the adult and how can we think about the adult in this way as well? Because the competent, capable child and so on needs a competent, capable adult alongside of them. Otherwise, you know, what's the point? This is it's a co-designed, co-constructed, co-lived experience. And so yeah, we need to position ourselves more as Loris Malaguzzi used to say that teaching was a job for professional marvelers, that we needed to be open to surprise, to wonder, to the unexpected, to curiosity. And I really like this idea. And I think there's several things. I think we need to see ourselves as a researcher, teacher as a researcher. I think we need to see ourselves as listeners and noticers and noticing things. I think we need to see ourselves as provocateurs. And I really like this idea that came from Karen Callahan, I think in Ontario in Canada. And she talks about provocateur coming from the French, because in Canada, you know, French being the other language. She says, we often talk about teachers being facilitators of learning. And she says, we shouldn't be facilitators, because facile actually comes from the French word, facilitator comes from the French word facile, which means to make easy. And she said, our job shouldn't be to make things easy. We should be there to provoke and to complexify thinking. So I really like this idea of how can we see ourselves as a provocateur to provoke children's thinking. How can we see ourselves as that professional marveler, as Loris Malaguzzi said, with a sense of wonder? How can we see ourselves as being a designer rather than a planner? I really, that's a big one for me, because it's designer suggests this empathy with the learner. It suggests we've got this relationship that's with the learner rather than at the learner. And I think it really appreciates the art of teaching as well, that teaching is an art if we're really listening. And I think we need to see ourselves as questioners rather than as givers of answers as well. Yeah, there's lots of ways to think about our role. I mean, I could talk for ages about what our role is, but a lot of it is about letting go as well of teacher scripts, what we think a teacher should be. There's a lot of I guess dominant discourse around what we think a teacher's role is, and yeah, it's once again it's unpacking words, because you know, some people love this word teacher, some people not so much. I sort of go backwards and forwards with this word teacher, because I think what does teacher imply something being done to somebody, but then I unpack what I mean by teacher and what sits behind that for me. So I just think we need to be open to these discussions all the time, and I don't think we give ourselves enough time for having these discussions around what's education for? What is our role? What is our image of the teacher?
How do you talk about slowing down a lot, and I think it's valid. I've definitely seen in our settings that at times that we put the learning out, or we have like maybe a child's fascination going down an interesting road and we're creating cities with them, or there's a fascination about the community, and then it comes to an end so quickly, and we think like it's maybe a day or 2 days, that learning's gone, and we cycle through and we're kind of like continually putting new things, new activities out, and overstimulating in a sense. What's your sense on slowing down? Why is that to become an important part of your message?
I think for me it comes back to, if there's the I don't know who to attribute this quote to, and you might notice I just throw out quotes all the time, but this quote about, if we're always rushing to the next moment, what happens to the one we're in? And I just think if we're always trying to move on to the next thing, how can we possibly listen? How can we possibly position ourselves as a listener? How can we possibly notice what's actually happening? And something's always happening if we slow down and we pay attention, and we've got those attentive eyes and ears and whole body.
That's an important point, David. I'll just pause here. Is if we just think about how often we think we have to come with a resource, we have to, like, I've got to turn up and I've got to either bring the right question, or I've got to put the provocation in the right way, or orchestrate something. But I love what you're saying. If you just slow down and listen, there's always something happening. The environment is rich. The child is the rich resource in themselves. If you can listen, the resource will start to, again, the environment and the resource will start to tell you ideas.
I think sometimes as teachers, and this comes back to what we think our role is again, I think sometimes we're afraid of silence. I think we feel like that one of our roles is to fill in silence. Fill in the void, that we have to, if there's a lull in the conversation, I should be teaching something, and we don't actually give enough energy or time to just being present and getting a little bit more connected to the natural flows and rhythms that happen within our centres, and just being open to those unexpected moments that happen. And really, it's positioning ourselves as a listener and a noticer. To me, slowing down is about listening and noticing, because sometimes the other thing is that we sometimes only listen to what we can explain or that we feel comfortable with as well, and sometimes we've got to be open to things that might wobble us a little bit, that might make us feel a little bit unsettled. Because if I'd actually said to you, oh, we did a project about a shop that was empty, you'd be going, well, that sounds ridiculous. Like, and the children wanted to cheer up a shop. You might go, David, shops don't have feelings. You can't cheer up a shop, So sometimes we need to let go of some of those adult things that we've lost, that some of those senses of wonder and curiosity and abstract ideas, and children can really sit with those ideas. You can say to a child, how can you cheer up an empty shop, or what color is magic, or what can be friends with this highlighter texture, and they'll respond to those questions because they have this curiosity that they haven't lost, and so I wonder what it is along our schooling that actually makes us lose that and makes us feel like we can't sit with those ideas. So I think slowing down is about listening. It's about noticing. It's about those rhythms. It's about fine-tuning ourselves to looking for clues of what is this revealing to me about what these children are interested in? What's this revealing to me about how they're working and the whys of the way they're working? What's this revealing to me about some bigger ideas, such as their relationship with their peers? What's this revealing to me about how they're making a connection between this idea and that idea? This is what it means, once again, to be a researcher. And you can't be a researcher and a noticer and a listener if you're moving too fast.
Can we go back to this project and just delve in, because I'm curious here. I've been to many workshops, and then you see all the great things that happen, and then you kind of leave and you go, how the heck how do you even start? Like, how did this come about? Where do you go? How do you start an inquiry? How do you keep it go? How long did this inquiry go for, by the way?
Well, I always find that an interesting question, because yes, there was a culmination, if you like, because we went and cheered up the shop with the songs, and we had a celebration and what have you, because the children wanted to gift the shop, and so this did have I guess a bit of an end point to it. But other projects and inquiries just seem to flow quite naturally into the next one, because you're always listening and thinking, what possibilities are there? But there's also the opportunity to revisit as well. So sometimes a project might go on, and you feel like it's come to an end, but further down the track you might need to revisit it, or it might relaunch again and start again in a different way. So I don't necessarily feel like there's a time frame for projects, because some projects can even happen within a day as well. I can remember just a project that happened because one day we got a freak hailstorm, and that just was a day, and that was it, But I guess we could think of all the things that happened within that day. Some of those ideas might have carried on further than that. But as far as how to begin, I think it's about really making use of your documentation, really looking at that and spending time to interpret it, and to look at it with colleagues, to not look at it alone, to think about what's this revealing to me about what the children are interested in. When we gathered all of our data and our information, when we went to the shopping centre, we didn't really have an idea where it was going to go. We were open to possibilities. And so once we gathered all of our photographs and documented conversations, we looked through it together, and we started going, okay, what are some of the common threads here? What's jumping out to us? What's really speaking to us? Is there potential in that? Of course, there were other things that were jumping out to us at the same time. We went to that shopping centre, and there were children who were interested in chairs, that they were taking photographs of all different chairs that were in, like, the waiting room of the doctor's surgery, and chairs in the Chinese takeaway restaurant, and just different types of chairs. And we still explored that in just a little way with a small group of children that were interested in it. So we did follow different pathways, but we make choices all the time as adults and think, what's got the potential here? We come back to those questions. What's worth knowing? What's sparking joy? What's got the potential for really deep, sustained inquiry? And sometimes it can be that it comes from an unexpected moment. Sometimes it can be from an interaction. Sometimes it can come from a child's wonderings or questions. We had a massive inquiry about, just because it was raining heavily one day, and one child said, how does it rain? And of course, then it started off, lots of different theories started to come about. We had one child who was 4 and actually explained the water cycle and explained precipitation and evaporation, and used words like this where you go, wow, you're 4. And this is where I get annoyed as well, because that probably isn't in the curriculum till grade 2 or something. But this child, already knew this at 4. And then I had another child that said, no, that's not how it rains. There's a giant who lives in the sky, and when he gets angry, he stomps on the clouds and makes it rain. Now I have a choice once again as an educator. What do? Do I say to Dylan, who said there's a giant in the sky, no, sorry, Dylan, your idea is ridiculous. Oscar actually had it right when he was talking about evaporation and the water cycle. Or do I actually use that as an opportunity for exploring different theories and pathways and possibilities? And so one of my questions that I always love to ask is just tell me more about that. so that you can get a little bit more information rather than actually giving any sort of judgment. Tell me more about that. And I did exactly the same question to Oscar, who explained the water cycle. Tell me more about that. I didn't say yes, no. I listened to Dylan. Tell me more about this giant that lives in the sky. And they had two schools of two camps. Dylan had his crowd supporting him, saying, yeah, there's a giant. Oscar had his crowd, no, there's this. And then another favourite question that I ask is, well, how can you show me your thinking? What ideas have you got for showing me your thinking? And in that way that they started to explore these different ideas, they came up with their own conclusions in the end that Oscar was right about the water cycle, but they remembered it a lot more, and it was far richer because they explored their own pathways. But also, we explored this giant. His name ended up being called Angry Pants, and because he always was getting angry and stomping on the clouds. And we had some wonderful, creative, imaginative, beautiful experiences getting to know Angry Pants, the giant who lived in the clouds. We had maps of how to get to his castle. There were all sorts of things. So potential for pathways and where this could go are endless, but it's about listening, and it's about asking questions that are not going to create dead ends.
Not to steer children towards right answers.
No.
And recognizing the sheer golden potential when someone says it's a giant that's stomping on the sky and it's crying, like that for me it's the recognition. It's having that ability to be divergent in your listening and allowing possibilities to live.
Yeah, and that's also part of that is also about bringing our families on the journey with us with this, because it's one of the things I'm really quite strong and passionate about is trying to make why we do what we do visible to our families, that trying to really articulate that and look for opportunities for them to experience it and to make visible the learning processes. Because otherwise, if we hadn't brought the families with us on the journey with the empty shop, for example, they might have said, this is what a waste of time this is. It's about actually looking for opportunities to involve them in non-tokenistic ways, about communicating with them and having that open communication. It's about looking for opportunities to, as I say, make them part of it. Like when we first went to the shopping centre, we took families with us. We invited them to be documenters. We said, look, we don't know where this is going to go. Help us. Can you take some photos? Can you write things down? And involving them in the actual process. So when we said, look, we went through all of the data we gathered and we found out the empty shop was the thing they were interested in, they were part of that process. They came with us on the journey. And they were able to support us in authentic ways. So it's about everybody working together, because the other thing that I'm really strong about is this idea of interdependency, that we actually need each other. It's not about individuals. It's how are we connected. And Carla Renati's also has also said once that I remember her talking at a conference organised by the REAE here in Australia, and saying that we often talk in schools and early childhood centres about moving children from being dependent to independent. She said, but we actually need to rethink that. It's not about moving from dependent to independent. How can we move them from dependent to interdependent? Because interdependency is actually what we need. Everything happens in relationships. Everything happens in an interconnected way.
Yeah, you highlighted a couple of things I want to dive into. A couple of golden things. One is, so just in this example, you said the children had cameras, and I've seen it in practice a few times, and I love the idea of giving them cameras to document what they're interested in. And just wanted to kind of bring some, it was a little small remark you made, but it stood out for me because I think it's such wonderful practice. And secondly, that you invited the community, the parents, the whānau, along with you to, a day in the shops. It wasn't like the zoo trip, or wasn't, it was part of everyday curriculum. It was inviting them into the thinking, the wanderings of the teachers, and literally co-designing curriculum with them. And I think it's a wonderful example there.
And do you know the following? Sorry, I'll let you finish what you're saying. But the following year, we had some parents very excitedly come and tell us when the shop had nothing in it, when it finally got something in it, and it was no longer. and it actually ended up becoming a beauty salon, which was actually kind of nice. This idea of this beautiful experience being a beauty salon. So sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's beautiful. And then the last thing that I picked up here, which I think is why I'm so attracted to the ideas of thinking that's coming out of that's kind of interconnected with the Reggio approach, is the idea of democracy and how incredibly important it is in this moment of time for us to. I'll take a step back just for a second, if you just bear with me. You've got,
Sure.
I think two of the things that we're facing together as a society. Reggio was birthed out of post World War II, the story of being invaded by the Soviets and the Allies, and it's kind of the structure of their whole foundation of their society was broken down, and it was in response to the chaos that they found themselves, that they started to form these ideas of democracy and the child as an active participant and a citizen. For me, what we're facing right now is a threat to information. Used to be power, but now there's so much information involved that misinformation is continuing. So the ability to take in a lot of information and think critically for yourself, I think that's important. Sense making 101. So children, when we're starting to make sense, and then what's more critically important is to be able to take on the other, the view of the other, to encounter the other, to have a different opinion of the other and have a different idea, but still be able to be in this dialogue so that we can hear and see and have a conversation together, that we're not left or right, we're not this group or that group, we're just humans thinking and holding almost lightly to our ideas. So when you said, look, there was almost two camps starting to form because they were exploring ideas, and how important is it for us to be able to hold different opinions, see the eyes of the other, formulate through those kind of differences, and come out with an inclusive unity in a sense.
Absolutely, and this welcoming of the other is actually so important, and we need to think about what opportunities exist for us to create spaces, to create a climate, to create a feeling where this is okay, to welcome other perspectives, to challenge somebody's theory and to have your own theory, and to and this is what's so powerful about documentation as well, because it allows you to make all of those different voices visible, to make them heard, and to be able to say that your opinion, your voice is just as valid as this person's voice over here, and that we need to. You don't have to necessarily agree, but it's about the listening and the opportunities and the fact that that what enriches each of us is the fact that we are different and unique, and I really think we need to create those spaces where it's okay. Another thing that I love in that I've heard them talk about in Reggio is sometimes we get caught up in, and I'm thinking about adults here, when we have maybe a different opinion, we start getting a little bit personal. We take it a bit personally and go, oh, well, I'm not sure that I'm happy that you're confronting my idea about how I've set up my room in this way or what have you. And one of the things that I've heard them talk about in Reggio is putting the idea in the middle and debating the idea and not the people. And I just really think we can learn a lot from that, and we can see that as an opportunity for how we work with children, particularly in our every day in our classroom. We would start with a class. We called it our class meeting, and it was our time of coming together and sharing and listening to each other's ideas and gathering, looking at what we did the day before. What are the opportunities for today? How do you want to follow this further? Have you got some ideas for showing this thinking? All of these sorts of things. And those spaces were really, really important for us because they were places of conversation. They were places of debate. They were places of exchange. They were places of encountering others and other perspectives. And I wouldn't be able to start my day without that time together. It wasn't first up. It wasn't as soon as you came in, but it was very early in the morning, because it was it set the climate for the day, and it allowed for us to have these conversations where it was a co-constructed process as well.
Mm-hmm. I like what you're saying. Like, documentation allows different ideas to live, and I just got this kind of sense, or this image when you said that, is to be able to know that I have a voice, I have an idea that's worth knowing, I can speak my truth, because how many of us struggle to speak our truth now as adults? You know, we've been kind of like, you feel this stuck energy because for whatever reason, the shame or this fear of rejection, or it's what do I know? It's not, that's so engrasped in us. So to create an environment in education where the outcome is that a child knows that their ideas matter, and then that when that idea is spoken, that it can live in this beautiful piece of documentation that has some space to breathe and think, and then come back to it tomorrow and revisit it, and to see that my friend has a different idea about the same thing, and his was allowed to live, and actually we're still friends today, even though we had different ideas about what the rain was. And actually this is a joyful process. I just think it's so powerful.
I think the other thing I just want to point out there as well, and I totally agree with everything you said, but I think sometimes there's an overemphasis on words for us showing our thinking as well. And so, you know, I think we can also express our different ways of understanding things in, you know, in Reggio, they talk about the 100 languages in many different ways. And so I often come back to, you know, teachers might say to me who are asking me questions about how and why I do the things I do, and they might say to me, you know, but how do you, but you know, I've got children who won't speak, or they won't say anything in a if we had a meeting time, and it's like, well, there are many ways to express your thinking and your theories, and so we need to remind ourselves constantly that yes, there is this dominant discourse that the way you give an answer is through words, but there are many ways. You can do it through a block construction. You can do it through a dance. You can do it through a painting. There's so many different ways that you can express your theories and your thinking. And once again, if we put two paintings alongside each other for how it rains, for example, they might be completely different, and they would be completely different because different ideas. And so it's about opening up to that as well. That I think sometimes we put an over reliance on words as well,
especially in the early years. I think, and that's why we have to show up to listen fully, to see beyond the words, to notice the urges that's innately in the child, building, dancing, singing, role playing. I wonder. Where was I going to go with that?
I think it's what. I'll just interrupt you for a second. The other thing I think about, I've used this word data a lot, and because it's one of these words that I do a lot of work with schools, and so they're always saying, "Oh, what's your data? Show me your data. Measure, you know, measure." But I'm really strong on trying to reclaim this word data, because I think data to me is about evidence of understanding, of joy, of engagement, of all sorts of things. Data is evidence. And so to me, a child's beautiful clay work is data. They're drawing the documented notes we take during a class meeting time. It's data. It's evidence of learning, of community, of that interdependency, of being brave and taking risks, of curiosity. So I want to grab this word data back, because I think data's been taken over by people who use it for measuring things and things that we tick off on a checklist. And I think, once again, you know, early childhood educators are very incredible, special people, and I've been privileged to be around them for many years, and I've learned so much from them. But I think sometimes we do ourselves a disservice when we don't grab hold of things and say, hey, you know, this is data, or hey, this is evidence, or hey, this is we do this because of this reason. This isn't this isn't just playing or all those sorts of things. We need to really try and remember that what we do is such valuable work, and how can we make that more visible? How can we really advocate for that work that we do?
Yeah, it's brilliant. Data is just information, and information is there to be wondered about and engaged curiously about. I think information is the thing that when we discover new patterns, our brain just goes into a frenzy, and we get a lovely little dopamine hit, and we feel great because we've put something together. And that's for me what data is. That's what information is. And so when you tune in, and then you see something in the child that you haven't seen before, you see them through a different lens or a different perspective, there's this wonder, awe, marvel, professional marveler. That's the moments where I think, although they don't come that frequently, is what really brings that joy and energy and makes everything so worth it.
Look, I feel very, very fortunate to have done this job for over 25 years now, and I guess my one regret from going now into consultancy is the fact that I don't have as much contact with the children as I used to. But as I say, I've been doing it for over 25 years, so my first 4-year-olds are now 30 or whatever. So it's a little bit disturbing in some ways. But I think one of the things I've taken away from my time as a teacher is to just never stop learning. This is such I love it. I learned something from the children every day. I learned what the horns on a giraffe's head are called. They're called ossicones. Did you know the horns on a giraffe's head were called ossicones? So there's always something. Remember that for your pub trivia night. But there's always something new to learn, but we need to open our heads and our hearts and our hands to listening to possibilities, to not have these predetermined endpoints, to not have this this idea of a product or an outcome that we need to meet, etc., driving us. It's far richer and more authentic and joyful if we actually position ourselves alongside.
Yeah, I wonder if we're almost out of time. We've got a reasonable audience. I wonder if there's anyone that has any questions. If you've got any questions you want to ask David, just pop them in the comments, and we'll see if we can get to them. But David, what is the work that you're doing as a consultant? Do you work with teams? Is it professional development? What is it? What happens?
It's a bit of everything, Rick. So I'm doing. It really has been diverse, and I'm actually really loving that aspect of it, because sometimes I'm working with whole school teams where they're saying, look, we're really interested in inquiry and what it means to be an inquiry teacher. I'm working with some settings where they're just saying, hey, look, we want to know a little bit more about this role of the adult. What does this mean? I'm working with individuals sometimes who just say, look, I'm not sure where to begin. Like you said, I've got all of these questions and wonderings from the children. I'm not sure what I'm looking for. How do I pick up which idea to go with? What questions should I be asking? Where should I be going next? I do a lot of thinking about documentation. I try and do sessions that are hands-on if I can. I like to do lots of things where you're actually experiencing things with not just listening with your ears, but with your hands as well, because I just feel that's how learning happens, is not just through listening and with your ears. But I'm doing lots of things. I speak at conferences. I've written a few articles, and I'm working with not just schools and centres, but also I've worked with some non-government, not-for-profit organisations as well, who just say, look, we really want to focus more on this idea of children having a voice. Can you help us with some things around that? And I just love it, because I learn from the people that are part of it as much as I hope take away something from me.
Beautiful. And if people want to get in contact with you, what's the best space to go?
So I've got a Facebook page, which is David Gilkes Education Consultant, but I've also got a website, which is davidgilkeseducation.com. And yeah, the details for that are also on my Facebook page. But yeah, it's it was a big step for me to step away from the classroom and to step away from the children. But I'm also a big believer in that the good old Gandhi quote of "Be the change you want to see," and I feel like I want to. I feel like I'm so passionate about competent, capable children, competent, capable families, competent, capable educators. I love it. So any opportunity I can have to do that, I take with relish.
I love it. Charlotte has got a question for us. Thank you for an inspiring session. Thank you very much, Charlotte. I've loved talking to David as well. How do we reteach teachers to see themselves as inquirers, i.e. how do we inspire our teams?
Yeah, wow, that's a big question, Charlotte, because I think one of the first things is to actually, I think, spend some time with anything you need to talk about. You know, I know there's some big questions, but it's coming back to what do you value? What's education for? What's important? What's worth knowing? And I know some of these questions can be really big, but I think once you start going into these conversations, you actually start to get a sense of what's driving people. What are they motivated by? Why did they get into teaching? What's actually making them get out of bed every day? And I sometimes one of the things I actually do is try and compare teaching to another profession and say, if you could describe teaching as another job, how would you describe it? And like, would you describe it as a chef? Is teaching being like a chef? Is teaching being like a gardener? Is teaching being like a conductor of an orchestra? Is teaching being like, and once you sort of have these sorts of conversations, it sort of unpacks a lot of what you value, what you believe in. Because if you start to say, oh, you know, teachers are a bit like a conductor because, you know, they're out the front and they help to bring all the children together, or you might have a totally different way of thinking about conducting and have this different reason. I think starting a conversation about what's the role of the adult and why, how do we see teaching is a starting point. Great,
very good. Okay, well, I think we'll leave it there. We've gone a little bit over time, so I really appreciate your time. It's here tonight in New Zealand, probably pretty much evening now in Tasmania, is it?
Yeah, it's 6:30 here in Tasmania. So yeah, but I thank you for the invite, Rick. It's been really great to be able to chat with you, and then any opportunity I have to talk about something. You probably guessed I do talk a bit. Any opportunity I get to talk about something I'm really passionate about is welcome. So thank you for inviting me.
No problem at all. The work that you're doing, what you're championing is just inspiring. So we appreciate it, and we'll be more in touch for sure, David, because I love the work that you're doing.
Thanks, Rick.
Right, lucky too.
Okay. Bye, everybody.